Today on PMEA's Take Note podcast, we are talking with Joel Menchey about his role in music education here in Pennsylvania, as well as internationally. It's all on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast, presented by the Slippery Rock University Music Department. Well, hello again, everyone, and welcome to this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast, presented by our friends at the Slippery Rock University Music Department. We are excited today to have Joel Menchey here with us. He is the president and owner of Menchey Music Service. So if you're in Pennsylvania, I'm sure you've heard of Menchey. You've been to a PMEA conference. You've seen Menchey. We're going to talk about what he does here in Pennsylvania, but then we're going to expand that into his role with a very, very important national partner. But Joel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
So first of all, let's talk a little bit about Menchey. This is not just a small one-store operation. This is a pretty big thing you have going on. Give us kind of what's the elevator speech of Menchey Music Service?
Sure. Menchey Music Service was founded by my grandfather in 1936, and he ran it successfully as I believe a 1 to 2 store chain until the early 80s. And then he sold most of the business to his management team. And they started to retire in the early 90s. And between them and his retirement, the business was almost was owned by retired people, and there was no succession plan. So I was recently out of college, bought the business in 1995, and have been running it ever since. And it's as you know from being in the industry, it's a wonderful business. I came from another great business, but it was not nearly as passionate. I was in a media / manufacturing business. But this is just such a fun business where we can work with students and teachers and introduce musicians to the joys of making music. We're currently an 8-store company. We have 5 stores in Pennsylvania, 3 stores in Maryland, and our headquarters is located in Hanover, PA, which is really where the heart beats and runs all of our rentals, repairs, print music, all of our offices, warehousing, etc. So that's who we are. Very, very focused on school music with a fairly decent concentration in piano.
So you touched on it briefly, but I want to hear a little bit more. I've heard this story a couple of times about, when you bought into the business. So when you bought the business, basically, I don't think that was your plan in life to say, hey, I'm going to take over this business that has my family's name on it. But you did because the timing was right. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that time
Sure.
and how that happened?
Sure. So I graduated from college in 1990, and as most college seniors do, I interviewed for jobs, and I actually interviewed at Menchey Music, and I didn't get the job, not because I'd like to think, not because I wasn't qualified to do anything, but all of the positions that I might have been qualified for, I guess, were filled. It was a smaller organization. So I then went to this wonderful company called Susquehanna Phelps-Graf. And I was a financial analyst there. And about 2 years into my career there, I started playing my guitar at night in clubs and at parties, and really got back into the business of making music and really enjoyed it. In fact, for a short time, I considered actually becoming a performer full time. Around 93, I found out that one of my colleagues, who was the manager of the Menchey York store, great friend, he supplied me with all of my gear at some fantastic prices, told me that he had resigned and that the business, for lack of a better term, was in play. He told me about that the shareholders were all retired, there was no succession plan. And it was interesting. It was about 2 to 3 years before the consolidation efforts started occurring. The Brook Mays, the American Music Group, the Music and Arts consolidators. So it was an interesting window where that really wasn't happening, and there was they didn't have a lot of good options. the shareholders, and there were about 12 to 13 shareholders at the time. So having worked in finance, I had a passion for music. I thought maybe this would work. And I put a business plan together. I approached my grandfather, and interestingly, he was surprised that I would want to do this. I don't know why. For some reason, he thought I was on this trajectory to, go into high finance, and I liked it. In fact, I do a lot of that now, but it really wasn't my passion. And I think when he learned that I really genuinely wanted to get involved in the family business, buy it, and actually run it, it changed things for him. And he then put me in touch with the person who was running it at the time, and we put together a buyout plan. And it was, at the time, it probably seems crazy that for I was only 26, I had nothing to lose. For me, it was almost a risk-free endeavor. I'm sure there were a lot of people who worked here who didn't see it that way, but as time went on, obviously that's changed. But at the time, it was just a great opportunity.
Well, and you've certainly grown it as you mentioned before, and into what it's become today, and I'm sure it will continue to grow under your leadership. So I want to talk a little bit about what you see and observe in schools, in school music today, especially as we come out of the pandemic, but also even before that. We've talked a little bit about the way music programs are structured in Pennsylvania, and the way that recruiting happens, and the way retention happens, or sometimes doesn't happen. Music retailers are kind of have an inside track to a lot of that, because they see a student through several years because they're renting an instrument and then purchasing an instrument. They see, how many students might quit after 1 year, after 2 years, once they enter middle school, once they enter high school, just because of the nature of it's a business transaction. And that might be something that a teacher doesn't necessarily track, because it's different teachers along the way. You've talked a little bit about this recruiting and retention and how it works in Pennsylvania. I'm curious if you could share some more thoughts about that.
Sure. So one of the things about being in the music industry is we're very open and transparent with our peers. So I'm part of a share group, a national share group, and that includes, I believe, 15 company members at this point. And it's given me the opportunity to really get out of my comfort zone and see how other music businesses, school music dealers work in other markets. And what I've learned is that the way Pennsylvania promotes music programs is quite different from how they work in the Midwest or even on the West Coast. Most people who will be listening to this podcast will appreciate we start most of our musicians in elementary school. So fourth or fifth grade. Occasionally we'll be fortunate to have a third grade strings program. And we start a lot of students, because at those ages, students don't have a lot of competition for their attention. I mean, of course, there's gaming and there's always more, but in general, they have more, teachers have more of an opportunity to reach those students and reach masses of students. And they do that through a pull-out program. So every fifth day or every sixth day, they see those students. And then as those students move up into intermediate, middle school, high school, some of them stick, some of them don't. In other parts of the country, what I've learned is those teachers don't have the opportunity to reach elementary students. They start those students at a later grade, 6th or 7th grade. And the bad news there is they don't reach as many kids. The good news is those students make a commitment to stay in that track. So while we have more of a triangle in our career paths for our musicians, in the Midwest, they have more of a trapezoid, and they keep more students into the high school, into their high school years. And I think it speaks a lot to the culture they've established, and it's something that I wish we could figure out how to overcome to sort of create more of a trapezoid as well, because we could have the best of both worlds. We could find the students in 4th and 5th grade, keep them, and really have strong programs. And I mean, if we could ever become something like a Texas, wouldn't that be wonderful? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful thing for folks to think about. I mean, I don't think there's any one right answer, one right way to do it, but it is something to think about, especially as programs now are concerned about numbers coming out of a pandemic. And maybe it's one of those things that sometimes there's problems that are there and we just kind of put them on the back burner and let them go until a light is shined on them, and then we say, okay, now we really need to act and do something. So I don't know what that answer is, but I appreciate the point that you bring up, and I suggest folks take a look at what some of these programs are doing in other parts of the country, and that, that might help them think differently about what they do.
And I think, as a music dealer, we can be a resource to educators who are genuinely interested in trying to expand their programs and change the culture, because we do have access to other dealers and those dealers' teacher partners. And again, we could be a liaison and assist in that process. But I think it will be, if we could ever overcome this, I think it will be a long-term effort, but I think one that's worthwhile. I think it could change the format and the culture of what we see in the school music environment in general. One thing I am very happy to see, and this is becoming much more prevalent in many of our districts in Pennsylvania, is the growth in the string programs. Mm-hmm. And this has been going on since I joined the business in '95, but it's not stealing from the band programs in most cases. It's actually adding to the potential pool, which is great. And with most of the string students, they tend to stick with it longer. So they don't have quite as much of a pyramid in the string environment. It is more of a trapezoid, but that is encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that too when I was in the industry world, and I just see what's happening in programs now, and that is wonderful. There's also, as we're still in some COVID world, the mitigation there is a little bit less intrusive, if you will, and because it's just a mask, it's not a bell cover, so that certainly could play into it as well. Now, just things for teachers to think about. Shifting gears a little bit, let's kind of move out of Pennsylvania. Let's move, actually kind of international, if you will. So the music industry is, it's just as PMEA is Association for Music Teachers. There's an association I'm sure you've all heard of, NAMM, that is for the music products industry, international association, and Joel has just taken over as chair of NAMM, 2-year term, and certainly something that you have been involved with for quite a number of years. There's just so many questions here. Let's start with, talk about what NAMM is and what your role is as chair.
Sure. NAMM is the Global Music Products Organization, and probably best known for our annual trade show. Actually, we have two. We have a Winter NAMM, which is the larger of the two shows, and a Summer NAMM. And these are events where music dealers and manufacturers and distributors, et cetera, all gather to basically conduct trade and commerce. And we as dealers make a lot of our buying decisions. But it's so much more than that. And sadly, most people don't ever get past that and understand what all NAMM does. Mark, you were one of the people who did get past that when we were engaged in the fly-in and many of the advocacy efforts. But NAMM does so many other things. There's a professional development arm or division of NAMM that just does so much for enhancing our abilities and giving us networking opportunities to learn from one another. And Zach Phillips at NAMM has just done a phenomenal job developing that program. We have an advocacy. It's called public relations and public and government relations. Why am I freezing?
Public affairs and government relations.
Thank you, Mark. Public affairs and government relations. And Mary Lurson has run that for, I believe, 18 years. And just I can't even scratch the surface and telling you the things that Mary does, but advocacy for educators. I mean, we on both state and federal levels, as you well know, you and I have participated in both the national fly-ins in Washington, D.C., where we for many years stormed the, if that's not the verb we should be using anymore, we marched on Capitol Hill, or we met with our representatives to affect the policies with school music. And we were able to get music written in as a core tenet in the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was a wonderful box to check. At the state level, and Mark, you're the poster child for the state of Pennsylvania, you understand that better than anyone. It's really about getting in and meeting with our elected officials at the state level and doing things that would change the trajectory of music in our schools. And NAMM really is the one spearheading that. So it's just a wonderful organization. I've been a board member in between 2007 and 2010, and I've been on the executive committee since 2015. And that the executive committee track is an 8-year track. So you have to serve 2 years as secretary, 2 as treasurer, 2 as vice chair, and also chair of the NAMM Foundation, which is a 501c3 that grants money to many organizations in the industry. And then, of course, 2 years as chair. Interestingly, my predecessor, Chris Martin, is also from Pennsylvania. So for several years, we joked that Pennsylvania was running the entire global products industry. We're still in that window. I'm still in fairly regular communication with Chris, and he's just a super guy. But he led us through probably some of the darkest days of this last 18 months. But it's a great organization. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time. I'm just beginning my 2-year stint as chair, and I'm really hoping to get through this and get through, frankly, a very a transitional period with NAMM.
I'm going to come back to that in a second, but first I want to talk a little bit about what NAMM does for educators. You touched on a little bit, but there is the NAMM Foundation, which does granting, but there's also a lot more that it does for educators. Best communities for music education, professional development, even that they provide. If you can talk a little bit about the foundation and how folks can access that generally for free.
Sure. So the foundation, and actually one of the roles of the vice chair is to also serve as chair for the foundation. So I had 2 years where I really learned a lot about that and what that does. Let's talk about the best communities. This was, I don't know whose brainchild this was, but it was something that was born 17 or 18 years ago. And it's an effort to recognize schools and school districts, primarily school districts all over the country that have well-supported, well-funded, high standards music programs. And it's really grown organically. I think the latest count, we have close to 700 districts who have gotten this designation. And it's a wonderful thing. It's something that schools apply for annually. And once you get through the first year application, it's a lot easier to continue doing it. But if a school gets the designation, and they don't all get it, I mean, many apply and don't get it, but the ones who do get it are presented with a certificate. And we have, as NAMM members, we have the opportunity to present these certificates at board meetings. And what's really neat, and I do this a lot, it happens in the spring. What's really neat is when you go to the first school board meeting, the school board tends to be surprised and very supportive and very thankful that their music department is doing what they're doing. By the time the school district gets their 3rd, 4th, 5th, 7th, 10th award, they're pretty much selling us on the strength of the program. We love our music program. So it's one of these programs that sort of grew out of nowhere, has taken on a life of its own. And it's something that we promote with all of our districts who we feel are qualified to participate. The Best Communities program is wonderful. We talked about the grant program that the foundation oversees, and that's an annual process where the foundation board members with Mary Lurson, decide who qualifies for these grants. And there are some wonderful organizations that provide on a very needs basis environment, who qualifies for these grants. The professional development is another part of NAMM's mission, and frankly, one that I am hoping in the next 2 years will be able to maybe have an impact on and enhance. NAMM is headquartered in Southern California, and many of the educators who attend the annual NAMM show in January are probably within a reasonable radius of Southern California. There's a whole other country out there. And I think if educators realize that they could participate in some of NAMM's professional development opportunities, and we could maybe through virtual channels, we've all gotten real comfortable with Zoom. If we could expand that footprint and really start to, get NAMM's professional development tentacles, all across the country, I think it could really have a favorable impact on music education in general.
Let me just hit real quick on one other thing about the best communities. It's great PR for your district. I've always told districts, even if you don't think you have a chance in the world of getting it, which is probably not true, but even if you don't think you have a chance, it's worth it to go through this application process because it's a wonderful audit of your own program. You're going to find out things that you didn't think you needed to know. And so those applications open up in the fall. So that's coming up here in the next month or two, I would say. So it's worth checking out. And of course, we'll put that out. But NAMM, anyone can sign up for the NAMM Foundation newsletters, and you can get that information for to find out when it's available to apply. Okay, so your role is NAMM chair, moving from the foundation, but to the NAMM chair. So you're in this role for 2 years, started here in July. You've got a lot of things happening for you in this role. So as we come out of the pandemic, what do trade shows look like? NAMM's CEO, Joe Lamond, has announced that he'll be retiring here during your tenure. So you're going to be involved with finding somebody to lead this association that has only had 3 people in that role in its over 100-year history. So I'm just kind of curious on your thoughts on those kind of really big things that are happening in your term as chair of NAMM.
So let's start first with the where trade shows fit into this whole equation. We've learned a lot about ourselves as an industry. Actually, many industries have probably learned this through the pandemic. We had Believe in Music last year when we could not have a physical show, which was great. It was a great opportunity for professional development. But what we learned was we really need to see each other. I mean, it's not just about the business that we do, but it's the relationships we establish in these face-to-face connections. So we had every intention of moving forward in January with our winter NAMM show. We unfortunately couldn't do it last year. And as it was announced, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, because of the Delta variant and the restrictions that we're assuming will still be in place in the state of California, we had to move our show to June, the first week of June. And it was a tough decision. NAMM has been meeting in January for as long as I can remember, at least 30 years. So to move it to January, where we're really getting close to summer vacations, et cetera, was a risk. But honestly, we felt strongly that the industry needed to get together. We feel strongly that the industry needs to get together on an annual basis. And that seemed to be the safest time to do it. And candidly, it was the only option we had. I mean, we considered a couple weeks, before or after. After just seemed too late. And we felt that the first week of June was the right time to do it. I'm a firm believer that when the dust settles, we will go back to having a strong trade show presence annually. This year, I can't speak for future years, but this year we are suspending the summer NAMM event just because it would be so close to the June show. But I'm a believer that with this industry in particular, it's important for us to gather. It's important. It helps the strength of the industry. And I don't think, I mean, if you look at our industry and compare it to, say, the electronics industry or the book industry, we're very fragmented. And I think it's because we're such a passionate industry. I mean, we have more foot pedal manufacturers and violin manufacturers. And do we need them? Maybe not, but they're still there and they're still vibrant and they still have customers. And I think that's part of the magic secret sauce that goes into this industry, is we have so many different people who are passionate about their niche cause, whether it's, foot pedals or, wires or, I mean, just some of the strangest little knickknack things, but that's what makes us different. And because of that, I believe there will always be a need to have an annual trade show for our members. Let's pivot a little bit to Joe. Joe has been a spectacular leader for the last 21 years. I remember when Joe joined as the director of professional development, and you could just tell Joe had it in him. He had the personality to do something in a real strong leadership capacity, and he has led this organization through some interesting, challenging times. So he's going to be hard to replace. But as my good friend Mark Goff likes to say, Joe's a great leader, but there are other great leaders, and we will find a suitable replacement for Joe. And Joe is committed to seeing this through and doing it right, because he so values what the organization and the industry do.
Yeah. Well, big things on your shoulders for sure as you go through this. And I would go back to the trade show part, and I would hope that maybe educators might be able to attend in some way, since with the change of date that may work out a little bit better because as you mentioned before, there are so many wonderful pieces of professional development that are designed specifically for educators as part of in-person NAMM shows. And to experience a NAMM show is like nothing else you can ever imagine. I think we all remember our first time walking onto the trade show floor. No matter what anyone told us what it was going to be like, it was nothing like what they told us, because it is just huge and overwhelming and absolutely incredible. And certainly music educators would just love to see, as you mentioned, all of those neat little things there that they could say, wow, that would be something that I would love to have for me as a musician or for my students as well. So NAMM has certainly done great things for the industry, but also for educators as well.
Well, thank you. It's interesting you say that. My first NAMM show was a summer NAMM, and I was overwhelmed. And I remember someone saying, yeah, but you just wait 6 months.
Exactly.
And I have a feeling that a lot of our educator friends on the East Coast who may have attended a NAMM show have only attended a summer NAMM because school's not in session. We may have just by dumb luck stumbled on an opportunity here by having a trade show in June. You're right, Mark. If we can get some educators from other parts of the country to attend the winter NAMM, or not the winter NAMM show, but the big NAMM show in Anaheim, it may completely change their perspective on what we do and what we can offer them. So who knows? Who knows where this will go?
Yeah, my first one also was a summer show, and was blown away and was told the exact same thing that you were. And then I went to California, and my mind was truly blown. And it was the buy-in for me on the value of associations in general. Because as you made the point earlier, yeah, the headliner of many associations is that event. But there are so many other things that associations do for members, hint, all of the things that PMEA does, I would advertise for. But that NAMM does for members, that are really these huge values year round in programs that they offer. And it's folks like you who volunteer your time and say, all right, I want to lead something like this and help out, that really make those things happen and kind of, help motivate staff to continue making those things work. So go ahead.
No, I had nothing.
Okay. Well, Joel, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us about what you're doing, what Menchey does. And we are so thrilled to continue the Pennsylvania legacy here of leading the global music products industry, at least for a couple more years. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. And you'll see Joel, of course, at PMEA conferences. He's usually there in the Menchey booth, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you more here on the podcast and in other things. So Joel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the opportunity.
And to all of you, thanks for joining us on PMEA's Take Note podcast, presented by the Slippery Rock University Music Department. We will see you next time.